Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Compulsion Academy. In this episode, I am going to be reviewing one of my old YouTube videos where I talk about all or nothing thinking and the porn rabbit hole. And in this video, I do talk about some things that kind of make sense, but I also talk about some things which I really disagree with nowadays and totally conflict with the Beyond Compulsion method. Now, the things that I used to talk about, which I now disagree with, are generally speaking the kind of advice, the kind of things that most people in the world of porn addiction recovery are also talking about. And, maybe one day I would highlight what other people are talking about and review that. But I think for now, it's definitely best for me to look at myself and do what Michael Jackson would have said and start with the man in the mirror. So let's go through this old YouTube video and I will be sharing the ways in which I used to think, which are actually very detrimental and can lead to people being stuck in this porn addiction indefinitely. So with that being said, let's begin.
All or nothing thinking is thinking in black or white. Life's either at 100 or life's at 0. You are either a complete success or you are a total failure. And when it came to quitting pornography, this is how I used to think. So imagine you have two paths. One leads to pornography, the other leads to freedom from it. Now, what would happen in the past is the moment I started to take a few steps towards porn, maybe a lack of discipline, maybe I saw something sexual and I stared at it for a few seconds too long. The moment I did that, I would think, it's all over now. I'd start to feel quite guilty, a bit of shame, and I'd think, well, I may as well go back to day 0 on my streak that I had of consecutive days without porn. And so I'd go and look at more sexual content. I'd end up watching pornography. I'd end up binging. I'd end up edging. And it was such a bad place to be in, because what I could have done instead is just go, oh, okay, I've seen something sexual. That's all right. That's obviously going to happen because we live in a hyper-sexualized internet world, and just accept that, take a few steps backwards, and then move back onto that path towards freedom from pornography.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it there. What I'm talking about here is the way in which in the past, as I said, I did used to see a little bit of sexual content, and then I'd have all of these thoughts like, okay, I've messed up already. I've already looked at some sexual content, may as well continue looking at sexual content. And in this, 1 minute clip of this video, I'm talking about how I could just take a few steps back. But what I want to really get across in this video is that actually that's a lot easier said than done, because once you look at something slightly sexual, it's going to create so much more desire. That desire to look at sexual content is not satiated by looking at sexual content. If you look once, you're going to want to look more. And then if you look more, you're going to want to look even more. And it just keeps on continuing. The wanting increases the more that you watch. Now, that doesn't mean that once you've looked at something slightly sexual, it's impossible for you to stop looking at things that are sexual. Moment by moment, in that specific moment that you've looked at something sexual, you still have your choice. You do still have the option to go, okay, I'm not going to continue looking at that. But it's very hard to even have that option if you don't have a tool to give you your choice in that moment. And so that's why in the Beyond Compulsion method, we obviously provide a full script which allows people to make that choice and really gives them that option. But I think the first thing I just wanted to point out is that, it's a lot harder to just kind of stop yourself once you've looked at something slightly sexual once, because it does increase the desire. And so that's why nowadays we always advocate to our clients that you do want to choose and make your choice not to look at anything sexual at all. And that's why I disagree with most of the advice out there that says relapse is part of recovery, or that slip-ups are okay. I mean, slip-ups don't happen. It's always a choice, you see. Anyway, I'll continue playing a bit more of this video and pick out some other things which I said which I now disagree with.
But I didn't do that. And the consequences of these binging and edging cycles can be really quite severe. For me, they were anyway. So I remember walking up to this top flight of stairs, the top floor in my block of flats, and looking down and just thinking, wow, wouldn't it be nice to just get away from all these feelings, all these intense, shameful, regretful feelings? But when I look back on that now, I realized that it was just my perspective on what I had done, which was look at more porn, which had really caused the problem.
Okay, before we go into those two problems that I talked about, a few years ago, I want to talk about that extreme mindset. And I know I did go up to the top set of stairs, and it's crazy that that's how bad the addiction was for me. But I talk about in this video a few years back that it was my perspective that was the problem. And I think I talked about that because I used to think that my problem really was how I felt about looking at porn. I remember thinking in the past that, well, most of my friends don't have a problem with porn, so clearly the problem isn't the porn, but the problem instead is my relationship with the porn. But now what I believe is it wasn't really the extreme thinking of I've looked at porn and so now I'm like this failure and I deserve to feel guilt and shame. I think what really was the actual problem, like now that I'm fully out of it, because back here when I'm making this video I was on some NoFap streak. I wasn't fully out of this addiction. I hadn't rewired the addictive neural pathways. But now that I have, what I now see is that actually the real problem was that I did have these addictive neural pathways. And so I talk about shame and feeling absolutely terrible and like a failure and things like that. And it's like, yeah, obviously I felt all of that because the addictive part of my mind wanted me to feel all of those feelings because it wanted me to look at more porn. And that's how the edging and the binging would actually happen, is that I had such low confidence and so many self-deprecating thoughts that it was like I'm so helpless in that moment back then that I would continue looking at more and more porn. I didn't realise that actually all of that was part of the addiction, which is so essential. And so often people are trying to solve the problem of low confidence or feelings of a failure or feelings of shame and things like that. And they're trying to deal with all of that as a thing in isolation, when really those feelings are being created by the addicted part of their mind, by the addictive neural pathways. And also just being in this like battle, this constant conflict of wanting to engage, wanting to stop, and having no idea how to get out of that, and like continually trying to quit something and still ending up back at it. That in itself is going to lead to somebody feeling incredibly terrible about themselves. And it's not their fault that they end up in that position. It's simply due to them living in this really messed up world and having the addictive neural pathways which are formed, and then not knowing how to change those addictive neural pathways. So anyway, I'll continue playing this video, and I think at this point I now talk about two things which I could have done instead, I think, to avoid the all or nothing thinking.
First of all, I could have taken a step back and walked back onto that path towards freedom instead of continuing to look at porn and progressively novel sexual content. I only did that because I thought, well, I'm at zero anyway, so it doesn't really matter anymore. I may as well just give up entirely and look at all this sexual content.
So yeah, just to reiterate again, I said there I only continued looking at the sexual content because I thought I'd already relapsed and was at like day zero. Well, actually, that was just another junky thought. That is the addictive part of the mind creating that thought pattern that I'm at zero now, so I may as well continue looking. And so again, the problem isn't really just that thought pattern in isolation. It's the fact that I was in the addiction, and the addictive neural pathways were creating all of these thought patterns that one way or another were trying to get me to look at more content and engage even further, because that's just how addiction works. And so these thought patterns, these junky thoughts, are coming out of the addictive part of the mind. And I think at this point I was kind of onto something, but I hadn't quite figured out all the jigsaw puzzle pieces. I hadn't put it all together at that point.
The other problem was that I just felt like I was worthless and just a horrible human being in that moment. It's like every single thing that happened in my life that preceded that binging cycle had just been completely forgotten. And all I was in that moment was just a bit of a weirdo who'd looked at a lot of porn. It's like I forgot that I was, a brother. I forgot that I was a son. I forgot that I play football. I forgot that I have a job. I forgot that I work out. I forgot that I'm on this path of self-development. I forgot everything that I'd ever learned. And suddenly I was just reduced to this shameful creature almost, which was really obviously hard. It was so confusing because that conflicted so much with usually who I am. And so I think that shame and guilt was a really big reason why I felt so severely bad after this cycle.
And yeah, just to reiterate again, this wasn't my fault that I ended up in such a terrible mental situation, really bad mental health actually, when I was having those relapses. And yeah, that shame and that guilt, it's created by the addictive part of the mind. The addictive part of your mind wants you to engage in this compulsive behaviour. And so it's going to create all of these horrendous feelings. And then you combine that obviously with actually being unable to stop this behaviour that you really, really want to stop. You're trying so hard to overcome it. You're doing everything you think is required to overcome it. So, you're doing the NoFap streaks, you're motivated, you're going to the gym, you're eating healthily, maybe you're avoiding porn, you've got all your blockers in place, you're doing all these things that everyone else in the world tells you to do, and you still are unable to stop the behaviour. But obviously, as we now know, this is due to addicting your pathways being addicted. It's due to this psychological, emotional dependency on a mind, mood-altering experience. The self-development stuff isn't going to help anybody overcome this problem. And so that's why we need to have a very specific way of dealing with the urges. So I'll continue playing this video a bit further.
So this all or nothing thinking can be very, very detrimental because, as I say, you don't want to end up feeling like nothing. We need to bring some more compassion, some more balance, some rationality into this whole equation when we're trying to quit porn. If we have a relapse, it's not the end of the world.
All right, so there I say, if you have a relapse, it's not the end of the world. Talk about self-compassion. I think, yeah, it is really, really important to realise that engaging in this compulsive behaviour isn't the worst thing that could possibly happen in the world. And, we obviously don't want to get to a point where we do have suicidal ideation. I think it's absolutely key to realise that there's nothing wrong with who you intrinsically are. This isn't a problem where your personality is fundamentally flawed. There's no inherent problem. It's that we live in this world full of compulsion, full of pornography, and lacking any real help, real neuroscientifically backed support. I think that's the real problem here. So anyway, I think this video kind of just shows quite how extreme I was back then. I know I'm actually talking about the past even in this video as well, but even when I created this video, a few years ago, I was definitely onto a few things, but I hadn't actually overcome the problem fully. And I think I was trying to have more self-compassion for myself and overcome this all or nothing extreme thinking that would help me. But really, that was just helping me continue to stay in the addiction with a more balanced mindset. It wasn't actually helping me overcome the addiction. But that's only because I didn't know back then that you can permanently change these addictive neural pathways and overcome the addiction entirely and get to a position where you do not choose to engage any longer at all. So it's been quite a mindset shift, a paradigm shift really for me to understand that actually the possibility of overcoming this is so much greater, and the potential for somebody to quit this entirely is 100% possible. Whereas back here, I was sort of trying to live in the addiction and be kinder to myself, which I don't think is a great solution anymore.
All of our negative behaviour is a function of some kind of need that's not being met in our life.
So just then I said, all of our negative behaviour is a function of an unmet need that's not being met in our life. Yeah, I just disagree entirely with that. That's what a lot of people teach. I actually used to work for a guy who used to always talk about how our negative behaviours are being created by unmet needs. Well, actually, there is no real need to look at porn. There's a wanting to look at porn. So there's no unmet need there. People are going to have challenges. People are going to have things where maybe they're not getting what they want in their life. Maybe they're not feeling the success they want. They've not got the love they want. They've not got the connection they want. They don't have the status they want. Okay, well, none of that is ever going to be a reason, a justification, rationalization to engage with porn. So to believe that you're looking at porn because there's something in your life that's problematic or that you have some needs that are being unmet, you're just going to stay in the addiction indefinitely, because there's always going to be a new unmet need. The addictive part of the mind is going to create these thoughts that you have an unmet need and keep you in the addiction in that way.
So the reason for me in the past would often be just loneliness. You know, if I've not spoke to anyone in a day or two and I've eaten quite unhealthily and I'm already feeling a bit rubbish about myself.
Again, some more junky thinking going on here. So I used to think that the reason I was engaging with porn was due to loneliness or eating badly, not talking to people in person for a few days. But again, it's just more rationalizations, more excuses, more justifications to engage. And what would happen is the addictive part of my mind would almost look for these reasons. Well, it would look for these reasons. And so then what I'm doing is I'd be basically choosing to stay alone. I'd be choosing to eat badly, knowing that in the future, then I can engage and I can get away with it, because then I can trick myself into believing that it was the loneliness and eating badly that was the reason for engaging. That's never the actual truth. It's just part of the addiction again, as many things are.
Then often I'd want to escape those emotions. Or maybe for a lot of people, it will be trauma. So what's happened in their childhood, and they've not really been able to share that with anyone. And so they're kind of stuck in this place where they're dealing with something really challenging. And so there's always a reason for looking at porn.
So you can hear me there, you know, I literally said there's always a reason for looking at porn. When you're actually in an addiction, you think there's always a reason that you're looking at porn. When you're out of the addiction, you realise that the addictive part of the mind's always looking for a reason to look at porn. So again, with this video, just so essential to get clear that the only reason people look at pornography, the only reason they engage in their compulsive behaviour, whatever it is because they have addicted neural pathways. And those addicted neural pathways are going to create these reasons to look at porn. It's due to the mind being involved in a psychological, emotional dependency on a mind, mood altering experience. Really, really important stuff here.
When we deeply understand that, we can offer a bit more forgiveness towards ourselves, be a bit kinder, realise that we're not some horrible monster, some disgusting creature. No, absolutely not. There's a rational reason why we're looking at pornography.
Okay, so again, you know, I'm talking here about there being a rational reason to look at porn. I think there is a rational reason, but that rational reason is that you have addicted neural pathways. That's the only reason, and you don't need any other reasons. If you have all these different reasons, then you're always going to continue engaging, because every time you engage, you can create a new reason. If you only have one reason, which is that you have addicted neural pathways and you don't know how to change those neural pathways, then you don't need to go around in circles and change your method every time. So with our method, for example, with the Beyond Compulsion method, if you chose to engage, the only reason anyone would ever choose to engage with our method is that they didn't use their script to change their neural pathways. There's literally no other reason. Whereas with, I think, most other methods, people are looking for these different explanations. They go into their trigger, they're figuring out, oh, okay, I dealt with this emotion in the wrong way. And then they're going to engage again, because then there's going to be a new emotion in a few weeks' time that the addictive part of the mind is going to create for them. And then they're going to engage again. And they're just going to keep on going round and round in circles and be what my coach would call a circle person, where they have a problem in their life and they're trying to find a solution to that problem, but they're using a different method every week, and they're never actually solving it because they're not getting to the root. The root with porn addiction is these addictive neural pathways. Absolutely nothing wrong with anybody for having these addictive neural pathways. It's happened to them. It's because we live in a messed up society, but now we have an opportunity to change them, and that's the great thing.
And that is really important to be aware of, because then we can start to figure out, right, what is it that I actually need? If I'm lonely on a day, I don't actually need porn. That's just an escape mechanism. Instead, what I need is to go out and socialise, call a friend, call some family members. The second thing that's really important to do is to write down, or at least think about, who you really are outside of quitting porn.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go on to talk about how you're so much more than a porn habit. Yeah, totally agree. I really, really don't like the 12 steps methodology of you are this like addict. It's like, no, you have addicted neural pathways. Okay, so yeah, I think considering who you are outside of your porn habit is maybe good for your general self-esteem and your identity, confidence maybe, but it's also not going to change the addicted neural pathways. So I don't think there's too much value in this, unless you're happy staying in the porn addiction and you don't want this to be part of your identity so much. But what I would argue now is that because you can change your addictive neural pathways and you can gain permanent mental freedom, why not do that instead of trying to live in the addiction and just feel a bit less attached to the addiction. Because if you live in the addiction and you just don't, identify with the addiction so much, you're still going to end up engaging. And so you're still in the addiction, right? It's like the alternative is you can actually get out of this addiction. But I was making this video when I was doing the NoFap streaks, and I hadn't met Mary Porlish yet. I hadn't learned a comprehensive method, which has worked for over 35 years. And so I was just trying to feel better about living in the addiction, which I think most people do, which is why they do the NoFap streaks and the intermittent reinforcement, make temporary progress, then eventually go back to their addiction anyway.
So much more than someone who's just trying to quit porn. As I say, you're probably going to be a son or a brother, or maybe you are an athlete. Maybe you have a really great job. There's so much more to you than just this person who looks at porn. And then even regardless of those characteristics, you might just be someone who's very kind, someone who is compassionate to others, someone who is a good friend to others. And it's those qualities, those traits that you need to consider when you're trying to quit porn.
I think, there is something there about, you are more than the porn habit. And I think maybe that's going to help deal with the junkie thoughts a little bit that come up around the shame and feeling like you're a failure, feeling like you're a porn addict. So we definitely do want to get away from those thoughts, because it's all part of the addict's part of the mind. It's all self-deprecation on some level. It's junkie thinking. However, it's also just really, really crucial to realise that however much you detach from the identity of a porn addict, it's not going to change those addiction neural pathways, which I keep on talking about. I know I'm basically just saying the same thing over and over and over, but I just wish someone had told me this, a few years ago, and it would have made everything so much clearer for me. Because also, once you isolate like these addiction neural pathways, you don't need to go and deal with your identity and stuff, because you just know the neuroscience proves that there's nothing wrong with you. It literally is just these addiction neural pathways that need to be changed, and that is possible. And also in this video, I'm talking a lot about how, you're so much more than this porn habit. And maybe you're a brother, or you have like a job, or you do exercise, or whatever it is. And obviously, like most people we work with are very successful people who are already very ambitious. Maybe they've got their own businesses, or maybe they're wishing to start their own business. And a lot of them have families. A lot of them are very just happy in their life in general. Maybe they're living alone and they're just doing really good and, working towards their goals and having a lot of success. And then there's just this one area, which is porn addiction or any compulsion, where they have these addiction neural pathways. And that's like the one thing in their life which is preventing them from getting to the next level. And so, I think this is very, very common amongst people who are addicted, is that they are generally very successful people, but there's this area of their life which is really keeping them stuck in a bad mental place. And the great thing is, once you overcome that and you've already got, a great life in general, is like then you can just go and enjoy that life even more, having the peace of mind that you've overcome this problem, you've changed your addiction neural pathways, and you're free forever. So anyway, I'll continue playing the rest of this video.
The likelihood is you're just being way too hard on yourself when you're stuck in this all or nothing thinking. And if you had a friend who was dealing with this problem, or a son who was dealing with this problem, consider, would you be so hard on them? Or would you take the time to understand the problem and try and help them out and help them understand that they're not limited to this identity of just being someone?
So I think this is interesting, because I think people are way more hard on themselves than hard on others, because there's a reason for them to be hard on themselves. So what I mean by that is, the reason, if you're in a porn addiction and you've got all these self-deprecating thoughts, you're calling yourself an idiot, you're calling yourself a failure, you're saying, why can't I overcome this? I'm such an idiot, I keep on failing, I've failed hundreds of times, I'm going to be stuck like this forever. You've got all those thoughts, which you wouldn't say to someone else, obviously. But the reason you wouldn't say that to someone else is because there's no benefit to you by saying that to someone else. You're going to make them feel terrible, but there's no reason. Like there's no reason in which your addicted mind would say that to someone else, but it would say that to you because there is a reason. And the reason that you have all these self-deprecating thoughts and you feel so terrible about yourself and you have all this self-deprecation is because the addicted part of the mind actually has a it's got a reason. As I've said, its reason is it wants you to engage again. It wants you to continue in the addiction. If it can make you feel helpless, if it can make you feel out of control, if it can make you feel like you're this failure who's going to be stuck in addiction forever, guess what you're going to do? You're going to engage again and again and again. The addicted part of the mind just wants one thing, It's going to do whatever it can to get there. When you get super clear on this, everything becomes so much easier. So the other thing I just want to say at this point, talking about compassion again for other people, is the only person who has truly, truly helped me overcome pornography addiction is Mary Paulus. Mary Paulus was probably the person who, from kind of an outside, like, bigger picture perspective, like in terms of the way she maybe communicated with me and the way she made me feel, that at first, like at very, very first, she was probably one of the least seemingly compassionate people, because a lot of people kind of had this approach to me like, oh, you know, this isn't that big a deal. Everyone looks at porn. It's okay. You know, you'll be able to overcome it. You know, relapse is part of recovery. And they just say these things that would actually enable me to stay in the addiction. They'd justify it. They'd create more junky thoughts, essentially, for me to use. Mary Paulus was the only person who told me straight, you are in a porn addiction right now. Now that, for me, was the most compassionate thing anyone could have done. She actually, instead of helping me minimize the reality of the addiction and minimize the true consequences, she helped me see the truth. She helped me see the real consequences. She helped me understand how much this was actually impacting my life. And it was through doing that I managed to overcome the problem through her method, the Beyond Compulsion method. And that is so, so important, because by doing that, my life has completely transformed. I'm so much more happy. I'm so much more content. I have peace of mind. I have confidence. I have clarity. And I have the life that I now wish to have. You know, I feel completely 100% free of this problem with changed addictive neural pathways. And so the most compassionate thing you could possibly do for someone is not tell them, oh, you're like messing up so much, and like be mean to them about engaging. It's more just helping them see for themselves the consequences, and most importantly, give them a path to permanent mental freedom. Help them believe that actually you don't have to live like this forever. You can make a change. This is 100% possible for you. We just need to give you the right education, the right tools, and get clear on the thought patterns which are keeping us stuck in the addiction, and the thought patterns that once changed are going to get us out of the porn addiction. That's exactly what I'm doing here with this YouTube video. Is hopefully, or podcast is hopefully helping people see all these old thought patterns that I used to have that kept me stuck in the addiction, no matter how good I thought I was doing with the addiction, you know, doing the NoFap streaks. I'm looking at all these old thought patterns and I'm identifying them and saying, right, it's due to that thought pattern that I was staying in the addiction. Nothing wrong with me, it's just I had addictive neural pathways, and these can be changed. So yeah, let's continue watching the rest of this video. There's a bit more. I know this is going to be quite a long episode in the end, but hopefully it's going to help a few people.
The next thing to consider is that this journey of trying to quit porn actually offers a lot of value to our lives.
All right, that one is just an absolute shocker. You know, what am I on about? How does being on a journey of quitting porn offer value to your life? Okay, I guess what I'm probably going to be talking about here is self-improvement. You know, every time you engage, maybe there's something to learn. And yeah, that is the path I took for like 9-10 years. I did learn a lot about life in general. I read a lot of self-improvement books. I developed some good habits. I got really clear on what I wanted in life, and I tried to build a very connected, well-intentioned, purposeful life. So I suppose maybe that's what I'm talking about. But I could have done all of that without being addicted to porn. You know, being addicted to porn was not leading to me living a fulfilling life. It really, really just got in the way of me living the life I wanted to live. And the only reason I did all that self-improvement stuff is because I was using that to try and overcome the addiction. And obviously that maybe helped me in other areas of my life, but it did not change the addictive neural pathways one bit. It did not actually help me quit porn. It helped me do some temporary NoFap streaks and then inevitably go back to the porn addiction again anyway.
Because we have to learn about ourselves. We have to learn about often our traumas in the past, or just some really intense emotions that are quite deep down into us. We have to learn that to overcome it.
Okay, again, yeah, we don't need to learn any of that stuff to overcome porn addiction, because remember, the reason we have this porn addiction is due to addictive neural pathways, mind, mood altering experience. our minds become involved in this psychological emotional dependency. So that's the reason. We don't need to understand more about our life, trauma, go back into the past. I think that stuff can be useful. And, I'm not going to say you shouldn't go do that. I'm going to be a big advocate for going to therapy. I think therapy can be a bit like going to the gym. But why do you, why are you doing that? Like, why learn about trauma? Because, okay, yeah, maybe you're going to get better at dealing with certain emotions, but the addictive part of the mind is going to just create new emotions that are going to get you back to porn anyway. So once you realise that the addictive part of the mind is always going to be creating new triggers, new feelings, you can understand that no matter what the discomfort is, it's gonna probably have this like chunky thinking attached to it. There's going to be a new explanation, a new justification to engage with the porn, as I say.
We also, for me anyway, have to learn about self-development. I've read so many brilliant books only because I ended up on this path of trying to quit porn. Plenty of books on, habits and mindfulness, and the best ones I'd recommend are No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz, and I would recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Just a point on Atomic Habits, and IFS, Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz, No Bad Parts. Interesting book. Yeah, I'd probably still recommend it. It's pretty good, but I think for addiction recovery, it's not really going to help. And then Atomic Habits, brilliant book if you want to create habits. If you want to quit habits, not the one, because again, it's just creating this learned helplessness, which everyone seems to have nowadays, which is, if I see a cue, then I'm going to have this craving, and then I'm going to get out of control and engage in the compulsive behaviour. Well, the reality is, if you see a cue and you know how to deal with any craving at all, which is 100% possible, then it doesn't even matter if you see cues. I'm not saying go and scroll on Instagram and see some sexual content on purpose and like trigger yourself. That would be crazy. That's just choosing to engage. But also Atomic Habits teaches that if you remove the cues, then you remove the habit. But in addiction, what happens is the addictive neural pathway is going to create the triggers one way or another. So it may not even be a physical cue that you see with your eyes. What it may be is a certain emotion. As I said in this video, used to feel a lot of loneliness or maybe disconnection. That would be the emotional trigger that would lead me to wanting pornography. And so a book like Atomic Habits, where we talk about the cue, the craving, well, when we realise that actually it's the craving which needs to be changed by changing the addictive neural pathway, that's how we actually overcome the problem. But Atomic Habits teaches that we should be removing the cues first because the cues lead to the craving. What I would say is the truth is that the addictive part of the mind creates a cue. It creates the craving no matter what. So I massively disagree with the Atomic Habits concepts around destroying a bad habit or changing a bad habit. And I think it massively minimises addiction as well, because I genuinely think most people who say they've got bad habits actually have addictive neural pathways, and that's the real problem that could be addressed if they had a method to change the addictive neural pathways and gain permanent mental freedom, where then they don't have to live trying to remove cues constantly. And that is 100% possible. Again, I know I feel like I've just been like roasting my old self and roasting most of the information out there on addiction recovery. It's been a bit of a downbeat episode in some ways, but I've just learned so much over these last 10 months that I'm just so passionate about it, and I want to share it with people because I know it's helped me so much. It's helped our clients so much. Hopefully a few things you can take away from this podcast and go, oh yeah, permanent mental freedom is possible here. And most of the information I've consumed so far hasn't really helped me. And there is hope, because I tried all the stuff in the past. I'd read all the books, I'd done all the self-improvement, not all of it, but like I'd done quite a lot. And none of that actually helped me. So if you're in the same boat, maybe you have a successful life, you've got into self-improvement, you've been doing a lot of work, and still you're looking at porn, just realise that, yeah, there's a reason for that. It's these addictive neural pathways, nothing wrong with you, and change is 100% possible. So yeah, I'll continue. There's only a minute and a half left of this video now, which I really want to analyse, and I'm sure there'll be more valuable stuff in here.
There's plenty of others that I've read, and I've only really read them because I was trying to quit porn. And so realised that this journey of trying to quit porn isn't all like, a terrible place to be in. Actually, it offers a place for self-discovery and transformation too.
Now again, you can see this junky thinking again, right? Like it's so clear once you're out the addiction that this is just junky thinking. So the reason that like being in the addiction is okay is because it's giving me this this self-transformation, this self-discovery. So then what's the end of that for? Like, what we teach our clients is, what you want to do is end the junky thoughts, because the junky thought here is, being addicted to porn is helping me improve my life. Okay, if we end that thought, what is it? Being addicted to porn is helping me improve my life, so continuing to be in the porn addiction isn't that bad. So I'll go and look at some porn. Like, when you get deeper into these junky thoughts and you can see them for what they are, you realize that most of the time, on some level, they're just there existing to try and get you to look at porn again. And that's why the addicted part of the mind can be quite hard to see, unless you're like from an outside perspective, or once you've had quite a bit of training on all of this, because what's going to happen is, it's going to be very deceptive. It's going to go down the dark alleyways. It's going to try and get you to engage in all these ways which aren't like direct. You know, it's not going to just say, I want to look at porn right now. You're not going to just go straight onto Pornhub. You're going to have these different like tricks and methods of getting towards porn. Like, that's what the addicted part of the mind is going to create. And so for someone like me, who's massively into self-improvement, wants to live a very successful life, has a lot of ambition, well, here's a genius way to get you to look at porn. Let's go down the route of porn addiction is helping me improve my life. It makes total sense, right? That's what it will do to someone who has certain goals. It's going to start to use those goals against you. It really will do whatever it can to get you to engage. It really is quite pernicious, and that's why it's difficult to overcome. That's why so many people never overcome it, because it's doing things which the average therapist is never going to understand. It's never going to even come close to figuring out for you. It's, you know, the average therapist is probably going to go into some trauma into the past, but it's not going to identify the junky thoughts, which really do need to be identified and corrected for you to stop engaging in the compulsive behaviour.
And then the final thing to consider is just, if you have already had a setback and looked at porn, then consider, well, why did you do that specifically? So this is more kind of just going into the detailed analysis of the immediate relapse that has just happened, or maybe figure out the immediate reason as to why you might have started to walk down that path towards porn. And once you figure that out, you can kind of get back onto the right path.
All right, so again, learning lessons from the relapse. If you've been listening to the rest of this podcast, you'll probably know by now, I really disagree with that approach. I really just don't think there's anything you can learn from a relapse other than that you're still in the addiction and that you have addicted neural pathways, and one way or another, they've led you to porn. And that once you change those neural pathways, then you can overcome the problem. But there's nothing to learn from a relapse. And it was thinking that there were things to learn from the relapse which led to me being deep in a porn addiction for over 9 years. So I hope you can take that one lesson away from this episode. We've just got 44 seconds left of this video.
And a really great way of doing that is do the how, what, now method. So how did I end up feeling like this? What do I feel like? What are the sensations? Are they in my head? Are they in my body? What does it feel like? And then now is, what action are you going to take now to help you alleviate some of those feelings, or at least help you be content with the fact that they're there, because you don't need to get rid of your urges. You just need to become accepting of them and know deeply that they are always going to be temporary.
Right, I love that last bit, to be fair. That's pretty much what we teach nowadays, is knowing that these urges are temporary and being content with them, you know, willingly accepting the temporary discomfort of those urges. That's spot on. You know, I've actually finally finished this old video with some sense, which is great. It's just the problem that I think I had back then is I didn't know how to willingly accept that temporary discomfort, and I didn't know how to think through the choice, because I talk a little bit about, you know, feeling those sensations in your body and things like that, but that's not going to change those fundamental thought patterns. It's not going to change those junky thoughts, and what's going to happen is you're going to sit with those feelings, you're going to feel uncomfortable, and then the addicted part of the mind is going to keep on coming up with these thoughts, these excuses, these justifications, these junky thoughts to get you to engage. And so you can only really sit with that discomfort for a certain period of time until those certain thought patterns lead to these feelings of discomfort, you're in deprivation now, and then you choose to engage anyway. And that's why, again, I disagree with most of the advice out there on just willingly accepting the discomfort of urges, because although that is true, it's like, well, how do you actually do that? And how you actually do that is you think through the choice correctly, because your thoughts create feelings, and those feelings lead to your actions. It's rational emotive therapy, which we teach. And yeah, you got to think it through. Use your thoughts to change how you think. And then change how you think, you change how you feel, you change how you act. Whereas what I was doing is starting off with the feelings, exploring those sensations, but those sensations are created by my thoughts. Hopefully that makes sense. 13 seconds left this video. Let's just wrap it up and then we'll be done.
So thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope it has been useful, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, that was it. Cool. So much stuff in that video. Hopefully you can take away a few things. Quite a long one. I appreciate that. Maybe I've not spoken as clearly as I would have liked at times, but if there's one thing you take away from this, I really want it to be at least some hope for the future for yourself, because I used to think I'd completely sort of sorted this problem out, really. I was doing the NoFap streaks, and I thought, if I'm honest, I honestly thought going on 90 days of NoFap, that's the goal. If you can do that, you've overcome the problem. Then what kept on happening is I just end up relapsing again and then feeling absolutely terrible. And then I was like, shit, this is so bad. And then I just got to a position where I was actually being okay with living inside of the addiction. And that's why I had the podcast, and I was talking months and months ago, last year, I was talking about how I'd relapsed a few weeks ago. And then Mary Portis came along and she said, well, you're still in the addiction. If you're relapsing, you're still in the addiction, right? And then it's only really through her method that I've realised that you can change these addictive neural pathways permanently, live a life of permanent mental freedom. And now you no longer need to worry about the certain emotions that are going to come up. You don't need to worry about all the junky thoughts. It's just complete 100% clarity on this issue. Overcome it fully. You can see that the addictive part of the mind is going to come up with every bullshit under the sun to try to get you to engage. But it's all just part of the addiction. It's part of these addictive neural pathways. Nothing wrong with you. 100% hope and possibility for you to change. And let's do that together. Continue following this podcast if you're not already. We have some free training at beyondcompulsionacademy.com. Go check that out. Thanks so much for watching or listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.